Hello and welcome to the Perils in Paradise star ratings from me and Alerno. Classically in the past, I've not got any of these wrong, right? Okay, sometimes I get them wrong, but it's always fun to do this and fun to interact with the chat, because sometimes there's cards I'll rate low that they rate high, and things I've rate high, they're like, you know what, I didn't think of that. Maybe I was rating it lower than I thought. I will say, other people obviously do this, and I would say give people a break. I think this is the hardest set to have rated in Hearthstone ever. I don't think there's ever been a set close to this, because it's not just adding 10 cards to your class like it normally is. With the exception of when, the core set rotates at the end of the year, most of the time when a set is introduced into Hearthstone, each class gets 10 cards, and it's pretty easy to go through these 10 cards, see if they're going to make any new decks and how good they're going to be, or how it's going to impact the current meta. Like, are any cards just going to slot into packages that pre-exist? This set, you don't just have the 10 cards. Because of the Tourist, if you put that Tourist card in your deck, you have 10 further cards you can deal with. So it's like every class has 20 cards, and that makes deck building a little bit more complicated, and how that's going to impact not just the new decks that could be created, but the old decks that already pre-exist. How are they going to, fluctuate from where they are now? So I've honestly been sat here for multiple days, making decks, trying to put them together, and I've come up with an idea of what I think is going to be the meta, and therefore rated it appropriately for that. So in case you've never seen one of my ratings before, it's a 5 to 1 star rating system. 5 is basically, I think it's going to go into a tier 1 deck. 4, it's going to be in a tier 2. 3, tier 3. 2, it's going to be a tier 4, or it's going to be tested and dropped eventually. And then 1 star is basically won't see any play. There are some exceptions to this rule. If a card I think is so good that it's going to be seen play in multiple different decks, sometimes I bump it up a star as well. That's like the one exception to the rule, and I have done that to a few of the cards this set as well. Funnily enough as well, when we were going through the reveals, there was one point where I was actually concerned we weren't going to have many 5-star cards, but actually as the whole set has unraveled, and as I've got to deck building, I actually think there are some classes that are going to affect the meta more than I thought they were going to. Also worth noting, I normally do this in alphabetical order based on the class. This time I'm actually going to go from tourist order, and I'm going to start in Paladin Rand, which was, fully enough, probably the hardest class for me to evaluate. We have, I'd say one major package from Paladin, and that is this sunscreen cheap spell type deck, in the form of Life-Saving Aura, Volley Maul, Divine Brew, Service Ace, Sea Shanty, and an arguably Sunsapper Lunessa as well, who is the rogue tourist, that makes your cheap spells go off twice. I thought about this package for a while, and one of the things I think that I kept stumbling over was that currently in the meta, so to speak, Paladin is arguably in numero uno position. Now, Splish Splash Whelp has just been added to the game again. It's now been changed to a 3-mana 3-2 from a 2-mana 1-1. That deck was previously a tier 1 deck with it in it. Without it, it did drop down the rankings considerably, depending on the rank, but I still think it was a pretty good deck. Now that it's come back, I imagine it's going to elevate back up again, but in the meanwhile, Paladin was sitting at top spot with the form of the hand buff deck and the flood deck. They were both really, really high on the win percentage. And when I was putting together my deck list for this, for, Mage into Paladin, Paladin into Rogue, or just a pure Paladin deck, I couldn't come up with a list of these 5 cards that I thought would be better than just running Hand Buff Paladin or the Flood Paladin deck. Therefore, I think these 5 cards are most likely going to see play in Mage instead. And I think this will be in the form of some sort of tempo spell mage deck, where you're going to use your Railer Sand Sculptor, you're going to play all these cheap spells, like the Life-Saving Aura that generates even more cheap spells, you're going to fire these off when Railer's on the field, and you're going to get a big board of tokens, so to speak, but they're going to be 2-cost minions with Divine Shield, aka they're going to be really, really hard to remove. There are other benefits for running this in Mage, and why I think this will be in a Mage package and not a Paladin package. Mantle Shaper, you have access to that in Mage. They want you to cast lots of cheap spells. Mage with this package, especially the Divine Brew that is 3 cheap spells in 1, makes it a lot easier for this to to go off. So I really think this Sunscreen deck is going to be in Mage. I think it's going to be some sort of tempo-y, very cheap minions, and then cheat out some Mantle Shapers and the Sea Shanties. The Sea Shanties are seriously big payoff. It's also good in Mage because on Sea Shanty, it's not just your characters that it has to target to get the discount. It's just characters in the game, and Mage is good at targeting opponents' faces, for example, with spells. So I think that is going to be a package. Now, I've seen a lot of people theory crafting with Lady Liadrin and buffing all of your minions, maybe buffing that amalgam as well that is coming out in the set and making some giga buff minion. You play your Lady Liadrin and get all these sunscreens back. I don't think that is going to be a realistic package. I think people will test it and find out that it's actually below tier 3. I think it's going to be a tier 4 deck. It's just going to be simply too slow. So, as I said, I think this is going to go into a mage package. Therefore, evaluating it as the mage paladin side of things, I think this deck is going to sit somewhere around tier 3. Therefore, I've given Life-Saving Aura, Volume All, Divine Brew, Sea Shanty all 3 stars. Now, Service Ace, I haven't given 3 stars to. I've actually only given it 1 star. My reasoning behind this is I know the benefit of it. The idea is that you put the 1-cost sunscreens on the Service Ace, they discount a card in your hand by 1, your highest cost card specifically, and it sort of means that the sunscreens are sort of like 0 mana spells. Not quite a 0 mana spell, but you kind of get the mana back, right? However, if you're running this in Mage, I think you might just run Concierge instead. This is a neutral minion that means when you play spells from other classes, they have a 1 mana discount. And rather than discounting your highest cost card in your hand, which is probably going to be Sea Shanty for this deck, you instead just run Concierge, and Concierge allows you to play all the Divine Brews off at once. It lets you play all your Sunscreens at once because it turns them into 0 mana spells. Sunscreens are Paladin cards, by the way. And you just make your Sea Shanty cheap that way, rather than just getting the discount. So because of that reason, I think Service Ace is going to only be a 1-star card, because I don't think you'll run that in your Mage package. I think you'll run Concierge instead. Now, the eagle-minded people, or the owl-minded, or whatever animal you want to call your mind, dolphin-mind of you, may notice at this point, you can't put Sunsapper Linessa in your Mage deck, because you can't put the tourist from the class you're touristing into your deck. Otherwise, you could put every single card from every single class into your deck as long as you went through the tourist chain, right? You can't do that, so you might be thinking, this might be a lower rating. Linessa, I'm actually giving... Oh, and you may also think that I might be giving this a higher rating, because I did mention before that there is this combo with Rogue, where you can cast O Manager with your repeating effect on Linessa. That gives you 4 damage and 2 coins. One thing I actually forgot about when I was doing the video of the reveals, the coins go off twice as well, because they cost 2 or less, so you actually get 4 mana back from the 2 mana spell, so it's actually minus 2 mana to do 4 damage. That's really good, right? Eventually, cast Hammer of Wrath. That makes your Holy Glow Sits cost 1, and then they go off twice as well. All in all, it works out to be something like a 31 damage combo when you do it all correct. I think this is going to be a meme. I think this won't actually be a realistic deck because of the fact that it is a 6-card combo for Paladin. Normally when decks are combo decks and they need these fairly large amounts of cards to go off, aka 6 cards, you normally have a control deck behind it so that you can live until you get these 6 cards in your hand. Unfortunately, Paladin as a control deck isn't very good, and I tried to put together a list to, make this dream a reality, and I just simply couldn't get the list together, or at least I couldn't get it together in a way that I thought, you know what, this is going to be a good deck. You're throwing in your Equalities, your Consecrations, your Arthas' Gift, I think it is for Paladin, and is it Arthas? I can't remember, but the Gift either way, and I just couldn't make a control deck around it work. And I'm always worried as well that if Linessa gets Dirty Ratted, and a lot of decks right now do run Dirty Rat in them, on the control side of things, you're fucked. Your combo just won't work anymore, and you simply won't be able to win, because you can't out-control the other control decks, because you won't get as much value from them, and they're just going to be generally better than you. However, even though I have all of these bad news for Linessa, I think it's still going to be a 5-star card, and I'm going to tell you why. I think there is one card in Rogue, which we're going to see in a moment, that is so good in one of the current Tier 1 decks, that you might run Linessa just to have access to that Rogue card, irrespective of the fact that you're not going to get any Linessa value from it. But this one other card is so insane that I think you might put this into your hand buff Paladin deck, and therefore I've given it 5 stars. But we'll get to that card in a moment. You might know which one I'm referring to, though. Then we have a few other assorted cards. We have Grillmaster, which you could argue is part of this package as well. This allows you to choose your lowest cost and your highest cost card. Obviously, you could put this into your Tempo Spell Mage deck, and actually I think I have got it in my version of Tempo Spell Mage to pull out a Sea Shanty and to pull out one of your cheap spells to make your Sea Shanty cheaper as well. Sankazel, which I think is just a great minion. Lifeguard and Power Spike that I think are a little bit below that. Grillmaster, I've also given 5 stars to. And it's mainly because I think Grillmaster could go in so many different decks. And actually, I think it could again just slot into one of the tier 1 decks that currently exists. And this time it's Flood Paladin. Grillmaster in Flood Paladin will get you one of your giant sea giants. Odd sentence, but you know what I mean. The big sea giants, the 8/8s. And it'll get you one of your cheap minions as well that you can throw onto the board. Grillmaster could also go into Highlander Paladin, and it will pull out probably Reno for you, realistically. Could be Ziliax as well, but it's a decent chance it's going to be your Reno. And that is going to be really strong to be able to choose for your Reno, because the big payoff for being a Highlander is Reno. It's such a strong effect. They've nerfed it multiple times now. And also you could get it to Tutor for a No, another good low-cost card in your Highlander deck. It could go into this Tempo Spell Mage deck, where, as I said, it pulls out your Sea Shanty, your Life-Saving Aura. Basically, I think Grillmaster could go into multiple different decks. I think it's a really good card. I think it's one to watch out for the future of all Paladin decks. Being able to tutor for your highest cost card and your lowest cost card classically has been good. We had this effect in Druid in the past, and it was good in Druid as well. So, 5 stars. Sankazel, I've unfortunately only given 3 stars to. I really like the card. I just can't see where it fits right now in the current Paladin meta. I don't think you put it in your Tempo Spell Mage deck. It's just too expensive for that archetype. I don't know if it makes hand buff Paladin. I think you would prefer to run the plushie for Lifesteal and Rush. I don't think you'd put it in Flood Paladin. And I was like going through it all, and I came to the conclusion the only deck I think will run this is Highlander Paladin. I think they will run it. It's a good enough value card to go into that deck. Maybe hand buff will try it as a one-off, but I feel like you'd want the lifesteal from this card. So even though Sanctazel is like potentially remove 2 guys, you kind of just want the lifesteal from that, because realistically the way you lose on your hand buff deck is you just get raced down before you get off your hand buff cards, and your inevitable combo where you get Leroy Jenkins plus the card that gives their attack to Leroy to, you know, do 20 odd plus damage. So yeah, I don't think Sankazel will quite make that deck. So even though I like this card, I'm only giving it 3 stars. Finally, Lifeguard and Power Spike, I've given 1 star to both of these. I just don't see the decks they're going to get into. I think Power Spike is just too expensive for the cost. Possibly a card that you want to discount with Service Ace, but I don't think it's worth having that combo in your deck just to get the Power Spike off. It's just not a good enough effect. And similarly, Lifeguard, I think it's more for a control Paladin type deck, and I just don't think one is realistically going to exist that wants to run Lifeguard. And if you do that, Lifeguard is not a big enough payoff. So I think Paladin is generally eating pretty good in this set. I also say, if you've been watching these before, I classically give Paladin all 1 stars. This time I haven't. I won't get cursed this time. Anyway, now we're going to go into the tourist class from Paladin. We're going to go to Rogue. And Rogue has got one big package. And that is the Burgle package with Petty Theft, Seashill, Conniving Conman, Snatch and Grab, Treasure Hunter Eudora, and Maestra Mask Merchant. Eudora, incredible card. Snatch and Grab, really good. Maestra can lead to some really fun interactions with your Burgle deck, where you're going to be casting multiple copies of... I forgot a name. I play this deck so often. 7 mana, play all your spells. I've completely forgot a name. But anyway, they can lead to some fun situations where you can go infinite on that card. If you play Bounce Around featuring Garona, whatever it's called, or Gamora, I can't remember. I'm really bad with names, which doesn't help for the star ratings. But if you do that and change your class, in theory you can get infinite tests. Test Greymane, I've got to the card eventually. You can get to infinite tests, and you can keep playing all these cards you've been playing from other classes. That's going to be really good. A great value deck, right? Listen, I've been down this path before. It never works. The value Burgle Rogue package is never a good deck. It's a fun deck, and I don't deny this is probably going to be one of the funnest decks on the opening, but I just don't think it's going to work. Mainly because generating cards from other classes is inherently a bit random. They are sometimes cards you don't want to play with tests, for example, cards that destroy minions with non-targeted text on it, because you might hit your test and break your combo. Sometimes they will do damage enough that they will kill your tests again, and you might not want to play them. Sometimes they draw you cards, and actually, typically with the Burgle package, you're generating or discovering lots of cards, and you might not want to draw a lot of cards, as your hand will get too full, especially if you're doing tests multiple times, you'll just fatigue yourself. So you might not want to play those cards. So inevitably what happens is, you'll have a handful of 10 cards, and 3 or 4 of them you just don't want to play, and then other ones you want to play with other cards to get a combo, and it just gets all too messy, and you just lose to an aggro deck. So, because of this reason, I've given Snatch and Grab, Treasure Hunter Eudora, Conniving Conman, and Maestro Mass Merchant all 3 stars. I think Burgle Rogue will be a tier 3 deck. Seashell, I've actually given 1 additional star on top of that. I think the most likely place to see this is in the Burgle Rogue package. However, it's actually really good in Paladin as well. This is one of the other cards. I don't necessarily think Paladin will run it, but if they do run it, because it's worded in such a way that it says non-rogue class cards and not cards from other classes, it means in Paladin all your Paladin cards cost 2 less. And if you get Seashell off, you can sort of treat it as like a 1-mana 3/2. And potentially Flood Paladin might want to do something with that. Maybe Handbuff wants to do something with it, cheat out another minion on top of your Seashell, which have both got big buffs. And maybe that's fine. I actually don't think it'll quite get there, just because though there is a world where this could happen. I've actually given an additional star to cover myself, but it probably is more towards this 3-star card. Petty Theft I've only given 1 star to. I think this card is actually just generally bad. It's clearly designed to go off with Linessa, or Toes if you want to call it that. If it goes off 2 times, you get 4 random spells that cost 1 for 2 mana. On a value-to-value basis, that seems reasonable. For 2 mana, though, getting 2 random 1-cost spells is just simply not worth it. The 1-cost spells could be bad, they could have no synergy with what you want to do. It's just not good. There's better ways to generate random cards in Rogue, so Petty Theft won't see play in the Burgle package. By the way, I should mention this package also can tourist into Warlock, and I think it will use one of the cards from Warlock, fully enough, that we'll get to in a moment. But I think in general, there's not a lot of synergy with the Warlock cards and the Rogue cards. And I think this is one of the downsides of the tourist mechanic, or at least how I feel about some of the interactions, that some of the classes seem to like sew together better than other ones, where it feels like it was a bit forced. Anyway, that's by the by. The other Rogue cards we have O Manager and Metal Detector. These can sort of be seen as stuff that goes into this Wishing Well package, which currently is like a tier 4 deck. O Manager, we also mentioned before, could go into this Paladin combo with Linessa. I think that is going to be a meme and won't work, so I think you're more likely to see O Manager and Metal Detector in Wishing Well Rogue, but I think Wishing Well Rogue still won't work, so I've only given 2 stars to both of these cards. It turns out that random legendaries for 1 aren't necessarily that good. There are some legendaries in the game you simply don't want to play, even at 1 cost. You also need to draw your well, you need to get your coins off, and simply some decks will just punish you while you're setting up your get a ton of coins in your hand, and I don't think these 2 cards particularly help. Then we have the location Knick Knack Shack, 3 mana 4 durability location that lets you draw cards, and if you play it on that turn, you get to draw it again. Incredible if there is a Miracle archetype in Rogue. Currently in Standard, there is no Miracle archetype in Rogue, and there's no payoff for it. I don't think this is going to go into the Burgle package, because the Burgle package is going to run some expensive cards like Marin, Eudora, Maestra, Tess. Therefore, I think you're most likely going to see this in some sort of Zoo Paladin deck, but even then, I don't think the Paladin decks that exist right now will run it, nor do I think any, like, current Zoo deck around like the new Paladin cards would be better than those cards. Therefore, I've only given it 2 stars as well. I think this is more of a watch out for the future of Rogue. If we do get some sort of Miracle payoff where you want to draw your entire deck, this card will go in that deck and it will be really good in that deck, but for now, won't work. And then finally we have Swarthy Sword Shiner. You may have noticed at this point, we haven't seen the card that I said you would definitely want to put into your deck in Paladin. And this is the card. So this is a 5-star card, in my opinion. Why? Well, I think, in all seriousness, Handbuff Paladin, if they could put this card in their deck, without, you know, the tourist mechanic, they would put this in their deck, 100%. They put, I think it's called Air Guitarist in their deck to get 1 more durability on their paintbrush. Swarthy Sword Shiner is potentially giving you 2 durability on your paintbrush, and it gives it 1 additional attack, which is important when the brush has lifesteal anyway, so it's 1 more health back as well. I actually think that Handbuff Paladin, there are a few cards in that deck that are sort of, you don't absolutely have to run them, but, you know, they do run them. And I think there is potential room to cut out 3 cards into your deck, maybe just 2, but possibly 3, and you'll put Linessa and 2 copies of Sword Shiner into your deck to make your brush get some additional swings, which increases your reach of the Leroy into the neutral minion that gives its attack combo, and they actually get it from above. It normally hits you for like 24 damage, or at least my experience from playing against that deck, it kind of hits you for around 24 damage normally, the combo. It might actually take it up towards 30, so that is going to be a super scary combo. The only downside, as I said, is you have to put Linessa in that deck. Now, there are some iterations of that deck, and it normally doesn't run any spells, or very few spells. Sometimes they run Mining Casualties, and actually, if you can get Linessa off with Mining Casualties, which is 4 1/1s and that Death Rattle into 4 1/1s with charge that die at the end of the turn, I think that's actually a fine combo for it. So maybe the deck will morph back towards that style, so you can get a little bit of Linessa value. But in general, you want a lot of minions in that deck. But I'm telling you, if Paladin could put this in their deck without the Taurus, they 100% would do. And that kind of got me thinking, if they would do that, would you put one random card to get this really good card into your deck? And I think they can justify it based on the fact that it's also a minion, so it will get, at the very least, hand buffed. So, at the very least, it's a big beat stick for something. Anyway, I think this will go into a hand buff Paladin. And not only that, actually, I think there will be some sort of Pirate Rogue archetype. I actually don't think it's going to be as good as I thought it was going to be when we started the reveals with the neutral cards. But I think that will go into that deck. I also think it will go into the Metal Detector Wishing Well deck. So I think it's fair enough to give this 5 stars. I think it'll go into a lot of decks and could go into a tier 1 deck. Finally, for this episode, we're going to deal with Warlock. And I'm going to sort of like truncate the packages together. Warlock has got a Death Rattle package, and they've got a Pain package, so to speak. And then they've got a card in the form of Party Planner Vona that kind of like sits on the fence between these two cards. The Death Rattle package is Sacrificial Imp, the Eat the Imp, Summon a Dark Marrow, which is a Death Knight Taurus, Fellfire Bonfire, and then the Pain package is Party Fiend, Cursed Souvenir, and Fearless Flame Juggler. And as I said, Party Planner Vona sits in between this. It needs you to take self-damage for it to go off, and it generates a really good Death Rattle minion. Now, I think there is a deck that might run a lot of these cards together, and that is the form of the Death Rattle Warlock Death Knight deck. I don't think this is going to be a particularly, like, value-heavy deck. I don't think, and by that I mean, I don't think you're going to generate the Death Rattles from the really big Warlock cards, which we've seen in the past. Namely the, I forgot exactly what it's called, but the Queen card, you know what I mean, the Queen card. I don't think you'll use that in this deck. Instead, what I think you'll do is you'll have these Sacrificial Imps in your deck. You'll have some of the Pain package in there. I think you'll have Party Fiend in there. You might have the 5 attack hit your face for 3 mana. You might have that in your deck as well. And a couple of other cheap Death Rattles that we'll see next episode from the Death Knight archetype. And it'll be more of like this tempo-y, minions get stuck to the board type of deck. And one of the big combos will be that you coin out Fellfire Bonfire, you kill a guy with it, and then on the next turn, you drop down your Summon a Dark Marrow and your Sacrificial Imp, and you'll get 16 of stats, where 12 have Taunt. And that's going to be backbreaking for most decks. And then once you've done all of this, you'll have a mainly minion-based deck. You'll take some Pain as well. You'll play your Party Planner Vona, and that will give you the Ouroboros, which is kind of like this end-game condition for your deck. It will just keep coming back. It'll keep just, you know, miring your opponent down, and eventually it'll lead to a victory. I think that is going to be one deck, and I actually think that's going to be a tier 2 deck. The other deck that I think will spawn from this is a deck that currently exists right now, and it's actually somewhere around tier 2, and that's Pain Warlock. In the not too distant past, Pain Warlock was a tier 1 deck and actually had about 5 cards, maybe more, in the archetype nerfed because it was such a strong deck. It's been maybe a month, and this deck is still sat in tier 2, by the way, right now. And you've given them 3 fantastic cards. Party Planner Vona is another win condition for that deck. They very easily on the Pain package can deal 8 damage to themselves. Not an issue. Party Fiend is basically a better version of Flame Imp. It does depend on the interactions, but I think more often than not that Party Fiend will be better than Flame Imp. And Fearless Flame Juggler, there are some really nice combos. If you just play it with the 3 mana deal 5 damage to the face, in total it is 5 mana for 6. Sorry, it's 2 mana 6/6 on the Flame Juggler, and then 3 mana 4 is it? I can't remember. It's a lot of stats anyway. It's irrelevant. It's so many stats. So I legitimately think these 3 cards are going to take Pain Warlock back to the Promised Lands. Because of these reasons, I've actually got the 3 cards I think will go into the Pain package as 5 stars. And then are Party Planner Vona, Party Fiend, and Fearless Flame Juggler. The Death Rattle package I mentioned I think will go into a tier 2 deck, so I've given all of those 4 stars. And then finally, Cursed Souvenir I've given 2 stars to. I think you'll see some testing. However, I think the Pain package has better options of dealing damage to their face than giving a minion 3/3 and then taking 3 for subsequent turns, as long as that minion stays up. My other fear about doing that is I think there might be a freeze package out there, possibly even more than one freeze package, with the Sleet Skaters from Mage. And if you get a minion just frozen up with the Cursed Souvenir, you might actually just deal too much damage to yourself, and it's not that easy to control. You make your minion harder to trade. If your opponent can lock it up, you're just going to keep taking damage. So I think that is a bit of a dangerous card to put in your deck. I think if it's actually going to see some play, it'll see play in the Death Rattle package as another way to get Vona activated, and you're probably going to be playing a lot of minions in that deck, so you could put one of your 1/1 tokens that comes out of one of the Death Knight cards, give it 3/3, and be relatively happy that you can trade it away when you need to. So yeah, 2 stars. Finally, we have Health Drink, which you might be surprised by this. I'm actually giving this 3 stars. This is the one card I think Rogue will run in their Burgle package. Therefore, I think that's going to be a tier 3 deck, and I've given it 3 stars. Why do I think it'll go into Burgle Rogue? Well, Burgle Rogue wants you to play cards from other classes. Health Drink is 3 cards from other classes in 1 card. And solely for that reason, I think it'll go into the Rogue deck. I think Party Fiend has a shout as well to just make that cut, because it's just such a good 1-drop that maybe you'll just eat the 3 damage to get the good stats into the board. But at the very least, I think Health Drink will make that list. Also, Rogue normally has an issue with healing. So getting a card with Life Steal, even though it's priced a little bit too heavily, might be just what Rogue is requiring. And then finally, we have Announced Darkness, a card that I said was the worst card ever printed, and people got mad at me. Well, I was going to give this card 0 stars, the first time I've ever given any card 0 stars, but I haven't. I've actually given it 1 star. The only reason to play this card is a tech card. You'll put it into your ETC, and this will be against Plague Death Knight to turn all the plagues into your deck into random Warlock cards, and pray you can beat your opponent with random Warlock cards. I still think you're going to lose most games doing that, though. A bit like you could put the Pfizer Zinashiri, whatever it's called, into your Warlock Warrior deck, and turn the plagues into random Warrior cards that cost 5 or more. More often than not, though, you would lose, because if your opponent is relatively intelligent, they'll save one of the plague cards over for when this conversion happens, and then they'll just plague you again, and then unless you've generated Announced Darkness, you're going to lose. Other things I don't like about Announced Darkness, the Warlock button is really good. It's one of the best buttons in the game, if not the best button in the game. Why would you want to replace it? I simply don't know. Anyway, that is going to do it for the first star ratings video. I will keep going through from tourist to tourist order, so next time we're going to be dealing with Death Knight, Shaman, and Demon Hunter. I'll see you then. Bye.